Sydni Chambers, Danny and Jill, they've done so much for so many people that they don't even realize.
His music is not only anointed, the teaching that goes along with it.
Very refreshing. He's able to take the word and really take you deep into it.
When he starts singing, the river just flows. It's just awesome.
He relates to all ages.
It's going to change the world.
I want to see a worship revolution.
You know, Danny actually grew up in a ministry family. He started traveling when he was 10 days old with his mother and father. They were evangelists. But his dad was actually a catalyst, and he would actually walk around with his guitar and preach and sing. And so that was something that was unique and different for that generation. And, you know, Danny grew up in that. But God kind of brought a stop to that in the late 80s when he was asked to come on staff as a youth pastor. And in 2 years, that youth group grew to over 700 students.
I first heard of Danny Chambers. He was like a big deal. Danny was impacting, influencing the youth culture in America with his worship leading at the major events. And then I actually met Danny at an ILM event. And that was his early days of pastoring.
Well, because the youth group was the largest in the state of Oklahoma, that connected him to Kirk and Nancy Pankratz, who were beginning this youth conference called Youth America.
I'll never forget when we met Danny and then Jill and became a part of their life all those years ago, beginning in 1988. Wow. God brought us together, and Danny became a part of a team with me to launch what became our Youth America summer camps and ministry that have taken place now all these years, really 30 years later now.
At Youth America, my sister and I, my older sister and I, got to be the typical PK kids to the youth pastor. And we got to hang out and see how he did life ministry, all that kind of stuff. But the biggest thing that was great was we got to see how he imparted a heart of worship to these teenagers. And I just kept hearing more and more about how much of an impact my dad's music had on all of these kids. Whenever they would come to youth conferences over the summer, they would talk about how great the music was, how great the worship was. But then they would come back the following year and talk about how the music carried them through their tough time at school, the crap that they had to put up with teachers, friends, all of the peer pressure that we all have experienced at some point in our life. But they always talked about how much my dad's music meant to them.
And Youth America was a gathering of little small youth groups all across Oklahoma. And they all came together. And in coming together on the campus of Oral Roberts University, there ended up being about 4,000 students. Danny saw that as an opportunity to lead worship the way he had been doing it. And because of that, all these youth pastors and students were like, how can we get a hold of your music? We need these songs. Well, that ended up creating an opportunity for him to record live every year at Youth America, which became our products that would go out.
My wife used to play this album that was her all-time favorite song, and I would hear it every time I got into the car, The Wonders of His Love. And so Danny, from a music perspective, has always been a strong sound and a strong word.
Do you believe in Jesus? Come on, shout it!
In this youth group we were in, we were looking for some new songs to do, and I remember George Chadwick got this CD by Danny Chambers, and there was something different about what we heard.
I believe in Jesus. I believe he died for me. I believe
Danny brought an electric kind of sound. I mean, he would just light it up. His music impacted a young generation whenever we really needed to celebrate more. And I think there was a lot of religious sounds maybe, but in the late 80s, early 90s, along comes Danny Chambers, and he really taught us how to dance and praise his name. Can't stop praising his name.
It's not just the lyrics or the singing or the band, it's like all of it together. Like the overall sound is just anointed.
It wasn't a youth, like what we would say today as a youth band. It was an unbelievable band, and it was produced really well. But the thing that really floored us were the songs, the lyrics of the songs, talking basically the Bible.
God used Danny to unleash a new breed of worship among a young generation, truly a pioneer setting the tone that the next generation would be a worshiping generation. And it was spectacular.
It's from the heart. You know, it's not just music or just not just an artist. He's a worshiper. And that sound comes out in such a relevant, true, realistic way.
I just think he had a big, broad impact on really moving our young youth culture of Christians over into the realm of being happy and dancing and celebrating, praising God.
There's a river of God that is flowing as the Spirit of the Lord is moving all across the land. It's touching the heart of man. The Spirit of God is falling. There's a river of God that is moving to heal the nations, to touch this generation. Can't you feel Him moving today? Touching your life in a new way. Oh, let the river flow. Let the river flow.
Actually, I met him when he was one of the speakers in Zurich for Equip, a training program for pastors. And this was really not expected, that one of the speakers was sitting to the piano, and then he led us in a beautiful worship time.
Cry out to you with hungry hearts. Come, Lord, and touch us with a brand new start. We cry for so much more of your grace and glory. We need you tonight.
And back then, the pastors were kind of reserved and to themselves and not really outgoing, and Pastor Danny was used for a response. There wasn't any, so he kind of had a shock just thinking, what is going on? They don't like that? But that's the way we were back then. But after the second day, when Danny sat down and played again and sang, we all rose and we all had a good time of our lives.
Yes, Lord. Yes, Lord. Yes, Lord.
Jesus, you mean more than anything. You're the strength of our life. You're our hope in the night.
Danny had this idea of reaching musicians and mentoring the leaders. And I'm like, man, I really need that, but I'm so burnt out and I don't even want to introduce myself to him. And a few weeks later, the Oasis Church was hosting this get to know each other picnic in one of the parks here in Nashville. And I remember going to the park, and I was walking with a friend of mine, Chad Dutcher, and Danny all of a sudden comes up to me. And he says, Ricardo, right? And I'm like, yeah, Ricardo. He goes, Ricardo, God just shared something with me about you. And I was looking at him like, okay. And he said, God said that you're a football player, like you're a player who knows how to score touchdowns. And but for some reason you're on the bench right now. And my eyes begin to well up with tears, man, as Danny was speaking this word to me. And he said, Ricardo, you're a man who knows how to score. They just give you the ball and you know what to do with it. And mind you, Danny didn't know anything about me. I was shocked he barely even knew my name. And I just remember just kind of almost falling to my knees and he said, can I just pray with you? And I'm like, yeah, that would be really good. And he just began to pray. You know, it wasn't real flashy. It wasn't as eloquent as some might think, but it had meaning and it had power. And I just remember feeling a certain way after leaving there, like I could do anything.
I want to know that his presence can come into my family, into my bedroom, into my marriage, into my children's lives. I want to know that his presence can fill my very life.
I like this inspiring way, you know. It seems for me he has a close connection to God and is able to communicate this in a good way. We have been about 120, 130 pastors from all over Switzerland, from all the denominations, and he found the way to their hearts.
His music has definitely impacted how I lead worship, because he would go into these Holy Spirit-led flow moments and he would wait and listen for the Lord. And there's like this thing that I feel like as worship leaders, sometimes we don't wait, but it's, you know, you wait for the Spirit of the Lord to come upon you and then you move.
One of the things that people always told me is that he's the same person off the stage as he is on the stage. He is 100% authentic, that he doesn't try and put on a front of perfection. He is first to admit that, hey, I have flaws, but I love God and I'm not going to hold your flaws against you because God doesn't hold my flaws against me.
Like when music, you hear something that you heard back in the 7th or 3rd grade and it takes you back. Well, whenever I get around people like Danny and Jill, I always get taken back to when I was ministered to by this couple and Danny specifically, and the sound that he projects and that he carries with. And whenever I hear that or feel that sound, whenever I sense that moment of my life, I'm always endeared to it.
There's a sound that comes from his passion. There's a sound that comes from his life assignment that has spread over the last 6 decades. And I really believe that it's just the beginning.
One of the things that God is doing in this worship revolution, he's releasing new songs. It's changing the way that many people think about worship. It may be a little different style, a little different tone, a little different rhythm, but God is moving us to a new level of his presence. And in many of the services across America, God is breathing new life into worship, and the church is singing a new song of love and adoration to him. And one of the things we're having to do is lay aside the differences, the divisions. Isn't that the same thing we saw in the book of Acts? As the people were in one mind and one accord, the Spirit of the Lord fell. And I believe that there's a union of worship that is coming, crossing all denominational boundaries. And God's Spirit is being revealed in the earth because of that union in worship.
Jesus, Lamb of God, worthy is your name.
He has won my heart. We are friends now, you know.
He's very passionate, very, very passionate, and very moved by his heart.
I love him. I think whether he knows it or not, he's affected my life in more ways than I could possibly imagine, because I'm still discovering, and as we all do, discover different things in life and who we are, and you're leaning on certain things in life that you remember, and a lot of that stuff comes from Sydni Chambers, old DC. Love you, bro.